Welcome to the C Word, the Conservatives podcast. Today we're talking about diversity. I'm Jenny Mathiasson, an Objects Conservative based in South Yorkshire.
And I'm Kloe Rumsey, an Objects Conservative based in Greater Manchester.
Welcome to the show, everyone. And today we've got a special guest host. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Aly Singh. I am an emerging conservator, very, very recently returned to Ottawa, Canada. I like to talk about diversity, and I particularly enjoy social history collections.
Some of you may remember Aly from being like the foremost Twitter person at Icon19. So if you followed anything that came out of hashtag Icon19 earlier this year, then Aly was responsible for a lot of that content. Today we thought we'd do a bit of a follow-up episode because it's now almost a year ago when we did a diversity panel with Icon at their annual general meeting, and we thought we would do a bit of a catch-up, see if we think anything's changed, that sort of thing, right? So here we are.
For those of you who haven't listened to or didn't get to listen to the diversity panel, sort of special feature, what did we call it? Special feature?
We did it as a bonus episode.
Bonus episode, that was it. It
was a live stream on Facebook,
yes.
And then we cut it down to be a bonus episode.
Yeah.
That's a bit more accessible.
So we were speaking, Christina was with us on the panel, and Neris was with us, and we also had Rebecca Plum as an emerging professional. So trying to cover different areas of the sort of diversity range, I suppose. Basically just to take the discussion out of the hands of the sort of
old white people.
Well, yeah, the stereotypical, what was it 42-year-old white woman, middle-class white woman,
middle-aged middle-class white woman. Yeah, that's right.
It.
Yeah.
Which I'm like thundering towards, I feel like, in a horrible speed.
I was about to say we'll all be middle-aged middle-class white women at some point, and then I thought, no, we won't.
No, we won't.
Wait, hold on a second.
That's the point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not me.
Yeah. No, we won't.
Yeah. That's what
I'll be a middle-aged woman, but not a white one.
Yeah, so. I'll go as far as middle-aged woman.
And that's why we're here.
Yes. Hard to know where to start. I suppose a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about has kind of been covered in our initial episode, which was the demographics episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Way back in season 1, which is how we started this whole thing. Because a lot of the stuff we've got is still the data from 2013, the labour market survey. That was done by Icon back then. So a lot of the data is still that data. But I do know that there's a new survey kind of in the works, kind of.
That will be very exciting to see the results of that.
Yeah.
There is recently, as 2018, the AIC put out a membership designation survey. It had 950 respondents. I unfortunately don't have access to it since I'm not a member of the AIC, but I have a photograph of a slide of it from Icon somewhere in my Twitter feed.
Ooh, very nice. I'll see if I can dig that up and link to it.
It's a bit blurry, but it is there. It's from one of the leadership and advocacy sessions. It was the folks from the Windtruther program in Delaware.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if I am reading the slide correctly, the AIC numbers have it for those 950 respondents being 78% female and over 85% white.
Wow.
And you guys still have the numbers for the UK. I did also look for the CAC, the Canadian Association for Professional Conservators, but we don't have anything like that yet. But membership is a lot smaller. Membership numbers are, I think, around 400 a year, give or take. So we haven't had the opportunity yet to do a survey like that, but I'm hoping in the future that the CAC does. And that all professional bodies do something like that. That would be great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to know who your membership base is. And I mean, admittedly, right? So now we're talking about membership. We're not even talking about all conservators because not all conservators will be members of Icon, for example.
Exactly.
So again, we're talking about a slice of a slice. But it is important to still look at that because it will give you a snapshot, even if it's not 100% accurate, of what your actual workforce looks like.
Exactly.
And yeah, so I do believe that it was a ludicrously high amount of just white people in the conservation labour market one.
Yeah.
Like much, much higher than what's in the UK at large. Now,
I think you said it was like 97%. I just listened to the episode yesterday.
It was a crazy amount, basically.
It was a crazy amount.
2% BAME.
You know what, I'm going to look
Though I'm struggling to remember whether BAME was even like a recognised sort of thing that people used in 2013 because it was that long ago.
Yeah, no, that's a good thing to probably start with, especially in any diversity discussion, the acronyms that we'll be using. So the acronym BAME, B-A-M-E, stands for Black, Asian, and Minority Ethnic, if I am correct.
Yes.
And then there is also the acronym BIPOC, BIPOC, which is used a lot more in North America, to my understanding.
Yeah,
and that stands for Black, Indigenous, and Person of Color.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you ever hear me say BIPOC at any point, that's what I'm referring to: Black, Indigenous, and Person of Color.
Gotcha.
Because that's how I would identify myself.
Yeah,
At least as a visible minority, I would say, yes, I'm definitely a BIPOC.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Right. So I just loaded up the little graphic that I made for the episode, because I did the UK Conservatives as 100 people based on the data from the survey, and 97% are white or identify as white of the people who were actually taking the survey, and the 2% that I remember, that's the disabilities.
Yes.
So like it's not looking great in terms of balance. I'm not going to lie. We're looking at very different kind of diversity populations in, say, North America versus the UK, because we've got different mixes of people, obviously. So for funsies, I wanted to look up what the UK as a whole looks like in 100 people. Now, even percentages would have been great, but actually this was a real piecemeal thing, because the last time someone had done a comprehensive one was 2009, which is a very long time ago. So it's very outdated.
Things have definitely changed in 10 years.
So I started piecing together bits of data that I could find, and even then it's not a very good overall picture, because ultimately these guys might have worked from different data sets and all that stuff. But in very rough terms, it seems like if we boil down to the UK as 100 people, 86 of them will be white, 8 Asian, 3 African or Caribbean, 2 mixed, and 1 other.
Wow.
49 are men, 51 are women. And then I looked into how many people would possibly be disabled. And if we go by the numbers that a charity called Scope produced, then as many as 21 would be disabled. But bearing in mind that being disabled means a lot of different things. So that's worth bearing in mind, because obviously that's 2 in the Conservatives as 100 people pie chart, which is insane.
Absolutely.
And then I tried working out how many people would be of the LGBT community, because that's something that I care about. And actually, that's not something that, factored into the labor market survey thing at all. So we don't have any numbers on that whatsoever. But according to some statistics, 6.8% of the UK population might consider themselves to be LGBTQ+. I'm not really sure on how they've arrived at that.
No.
I have some questions about that entire thing.
That seems like a bit more of a guess, because not everybody is comfortable advertising, how they have their gender identity or their orientation or anything like that. That's not something a lot of people want to share.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is really sad.
It is. Basically, that's a bit more of a shot in the dark, I think. Like, I don't think we actually have very good numbers on that. But I thought it was interesting as a kind of baseline that that's what the UK population looks like. And then when we look at what the Conservatives look like, that's very different. Now, something that there aren't numbers for in this, and that I'm curious about from a completely different point of view, is how this relates to class. But that's a really, really British kind of mentality, I suppose. Yeah. And that just shows how incredibly assimilated I am now that I'm starting to worry about class.
Well, I think it's from the point of view of someone brought up always in the UK. I'm trying to think of attitudes to the concept of class and talking about class. And I think those attitudes are, we're sort of supposed to think that class isn't a thing anymore. That, that's something that we should have grown out of, kind of thing. And I know there are political roots to this way of thinking, but I can't remember what they are. So I'm sorry. But it's obvious that class is still a thing.
And it's the same here. I mean, I don't think it's talked about quite as like in such a nuanced way as in the UK, but we still will look around and be like, oh, that person's working class, or oh, that person's upper class, their family owns a construction company. We still feel that in the way that we interact with our peers and our colleagues and the people on the street, like which neighborhood you lived in. You still get that here. It's not as talked about, but you still get it.
Exactly. And I think part of that, maybe in both places, all places, part of the fact that we are failing on that is because we still feel that we can't talk about it, or that it's something that, oh no, that doesn't affect people nowadays or something. But maybe if we just got a bit more sort of down to earth about the whole thing, then we would get better at dealing with it.
I think this is really, really interesting, because I feel like class comes up quite a lot, actually.
And you also have to remember the status quo as well. I mean, the structures that we have in our society is what's keeping people in the tier that they would call themselves being a part of, the class that they're part of. And at the same time, there are, while very few, there are places where you can climb from one class to the one above you, in theory. And people don't want to dismantle that system because of the privilege inherent in being part of that system.
Yeah.
It's in my opinion that you can't have a conversation about diversity without talking about privilege and understanding that that's part of the reason why we have a diversity problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. And I think this is one of those fascinating things because Sweden's system is very different. And again, I think there's this point where we all pretend that class doesn't exist anymore because, we're so much better than that now.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, only so true. And then I think it's much more deeply rooted in British society to think about class, which is really interesting for me to observe. And then I get into rows with people about what class I count as and what can be considered class. So you both brought up economy, like the financial side of things, which is something that I automatically think of. But loads of people in the UK have told me that actually the financial side doesn't matter. Like poverty has nothing to do with class.
Wait, what?
Poverty has nothing to do with class because you can be a temporarily embarrassed millionaire, or you can be or like loads of these things, right? I think completely denying the fact that I think the financial side has a really, really strong anchoring in what kind of class that you can consider yourself as, or what you perceive yourself to be and what others perceive you as.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's a whole bundle of things that people are very unhappy unpicking. It's really, really fun and very exhausting to wade into these conversations.
What is the general rule when you go to a family meeting or a family holiday event, right? It's like you don't talk about politics and you don't talk about money. Those are the two things. Nobody wants to talk about them.
Also not
because
religion.
There's this and religion, there's religion. But it just makes too many people uncomfortable. But we should be talking about them.
Because, for example, I've been in plenty of situations where people have said, well, there's absolutely no way that anyone who works in a museum can be working class because it's a middle class institution. So anyone who works there will not be working class by definition, which I thought was an interesting one because I very much disagree.
I disagree.
I very much disagree. Not that museums aren't middle class institutions, because I think in terms of what they currently are, and we're trying to break free from that. Historically, I would definitely say that they are.
Yeah.
And they continue to be, and we're trying to break that down. But I don't think that just because you work at a museum, you have to be considered middle class or anything of the sort. I think that's false. I just don't agree with that. And I think that possibly comes from just more privilege, to be honest. Just looking around and going, everyone here seems quite comfortable. So I think we're probably all middle class. Which is an interesting assumption, like conveniently forgetting anyone who doesn't fit that.
Yeah. How about this definition? So the way that my museum considers like audiences is they will refer to non-typical museum audiences as a group of people or as a demographic to increase access to, or encourage participation in. And that doesn't just cover class or people from,
lower socioeconomic
backgrounds.
Smooth.
Yeah.
I should say it's election season in Canada, so the buzzwords are all over the news.
Yeah, well done. But also people from different areas of Greater Manchester. I suppose there's the problems of people not having enough money to consider working in a museum and people not feeling that it's their place.
You also have to consider where exactly these museums are located. I mean, these big institutions are located in the heart of downtown, in the middle of the tourism sector, in the quote-unquote gentrified areas. And
that can be terrifying.
People who aren't comfortable going into those neighborhoods might not want to visit the museums or work at these places because they don't feel comfortable even walking to work.
Yeah, is this a really interesting thing that you're getting at? That sometimes just the mere look of our institutions means that they're off-putting to work in or to visit. Like they can be really scary. Half of them look like classical temples, for goodness sake.
We've got here in Canada a lot of buildings that are made of glass, made of concrete, and there's these beautiful architectural marvels. But if it's not something that you're used to seeing, it is shocking, And then when you add in the cost to enter as well, that's an immediate turnoff for someone who just can't afford a ticket. So yeah, it's not great.
So yeah, I think there's plenty of reason to get fighty about class still. It is a massive diversity factor, and I think it is worth talking about.
I will say that Leanne Tonkin had an excellent plenary session at ICON about forging ways through the fear factor and how classism kind of worked against the beginning of her career. So shout out to Leanne for that, because it was really eye-opening for someone who hasn't had thoughts in that kind of direction before, because I see diversity as an issue in other ways than somebody else, for example. So.
Absolutely. And I think that was a very uncomfortable talk for a lot of people. And that's the whole point. It needed to be uncomfortable. And then also, I just wanted to give a shout out to a group called Museum As Muck, because they do some great work. And later, we're going to hear a bit more about class in the museum sector.
Okay. We already know, we've covered the ground that the conservation field is largely homogenous and that it's pretty much white and middle-aged women. We know that. And we are seeing in the emerging conservation bracket, I suppose you could say, more and more people from of color, of different backgrounds, coming into the field. So that's absolutely incredible. But what I am finding, at least in my own experiences, I'm a biracial woman. My father is from India. My mother is from Northern Ontario. She is white. And I'm finding, as I'm getting experience in the field, I'm oftentimes the only person of color in that setting. And while that's exciting because it means that doors are starting to open for people of color in the field, it's also nerve-wracking because many times you'll have a conversation about an object, about a context, about a treatment, and I might say, oh, well, why don't we do this, just because I'm coming from a different perspective? And, people are like, oh, that's really great. Why don't you, take the lead and do the research on that? But it's an object that is not something that is in my cultural background, let's say. So objects that come from indigenous groups, objects that come from the continent of Africa, for example, I can't best represent them, but I'm oftentimes given the job of representing them as the only person of color in the laboratory setting. And I think this can be said across the board for any kinds of things, like people with different gender identities and orientations, people of different religions and backgrounds. They oftentimes, if they're the only person in that setting that can represent a large grouping, they get, I don't want to say saddled, but they get the job of having to represent something that they might not feel comfortable representing, but they know they have to step up and do it.
That is true. It's true what you say, that if you're the diversity representative in your organization, in whatever form that takes, then you do end up being the person who has to do everything, which is terrifying and very exhausting. But at the same time, it's not right that any one person gets that much pressure.
No, but on the other hand, I completely agree. It's a really awkward, slightly shameful situation to put anyone in. Of you're our token person. Could you just you can do the same job as somebody who's the sort of cultural owner of this object, right?
Hello, you're foreign.
Yeah,
would you like to work on?
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah,
no.
Yeah,
but on the other hand, I do think that's preferable to, say, for example, someone white British like myself, if the object is a product of colonial theft, essentially. And I don't think I am part of the problem, but I'm certainly not part of the solution. So though it's not fair to put anyone in the bracket of now it's your job, it's also not necessarily right for me to go, I'll just carry on then.
This is a bit interesting because I'm of the mindset that repatriation is a good thing, right? And I don't want to segue into that. That is an entirely different can of worms. But I had a conversation with a friend of mine recently where I joked that, the British Museum is hiring. Haha, they'll never hire me because I've been so outspoken about diversity in the workplace and repatriation and da-da-da-da-da. And my friend joked back, oh yeah, they're never going to hire you because you've talked about that. And it just brings up the thought process that people who would fall into that diversity bracket, so to speak, if you check the boxes on the application, can be really afraid to rock the boat when they go into these institutions, because if they are the only person or one of only a handful, they don't want to disrupt the status quo in a way that not only could potentially irrevocably harm their career, but also keep from hiring other people in similar or of similar diverse backgrounds and beyond. And it's just frustrating to me, at least, because that is kind of stymieing what the society as a whole can learn, because who we are impacts what we or how we interpret objects and how we present them, right? If the history and the narratives presented to the public and their understandings of our shared history isn't really a shared history if the people presenting them is just a very small demographic of the whole.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say that you are the second person to actually express that experience to me. Someone else who wanted to remain anonymous said something very similar about how they felt like if they were hired by an institution, they would stop campaigning because they would feel like they would be liable to be fired or mistreated in some way if they then kept on being a beacon of hope, which is like just terrible. Like the fact that that we're thinking that getting a job in one of these prestigious places means that we'd essentially have to sell our soul and stop caring about the things that we care about, which is basic, equality, is appalling. But you're not the first person to have said that, and I know that you're not the only one to be thinking it. So that is another problem.
Well, what's interesting too is that like our fellow conservators, they're the ones, and well, everybody in the museum field for the most part, on the individual level, people are actively working toward making change, to putting platforms in place for these voices. But it's still the structure as a whole, not just of our society, but in the way the heritage field works, that still tends to be a little bit behind the times, I suppose you could say, in terms of how we're dealing with people as individuals and people of diverse backgrounds. So shout out to all of the conservators and collections managers and curators out there who are pulling in, people from, let's say, lower socioeconomic backgrounds for internships and providing them with opportunities. And let's shout out all the people who are trying to decolonize their museums. We still have a lot more work to do in terms of getting the structure of the institutions themselves as a whole body up to speed with where we are as people.
I wonder if then we need to, as conservators, but as people who work in museums generally, encourage a pressure to be put on museums from the community. Because I mean, there are certainly museums who are trying to be better, but then there are others that aren't quite there yet, let's say, or that are, at least if they are trying to be better, they're at the moment so famously rubbish at this particular thing that it hasn't got to the community yet that they're trying to be better. So
I would like to give a shout out here to Fair Museum Jobs, who is
they're incredible.
They are. They're a force to be reckoned with. So they call out this sort of behavior everywhere. I know that Icon has said that they are actively working with them, which I think is a really important step. Like they will call out when jobs are advertised that aren't paying enough, or when work practices are bad. And I love that kind of collaboration.
Yeah,
like
it's brilliant.
There needs to be naming and shaming. Just on the kind of topic of labour practices and jobs and all that stuff, I just wanted to hark back to what we mentioned in a previous episode, which was that they've revised the minimums.
Yes.
Recommended entry-level conservator salary finally is adjusted with inflation, which means that it's gone up from £24,648 per year to £27,108 per year, which is a bit of a hike, but then time has progressed. That was long overdue, and we were all celebrating when it happened. And on that topic, actually, before I knew this was happening, in August, I asked conservators if they were earning less than the 24k minimum. I asked them on Twitter in a Twitter poll from the podcast, and 45% said that they did earn more, which was good. And 25% said that they earned less than that, regardless of where they were in their career. And then, when this was revised, I ran the poll again, at which point 52% said they earned less than 27k. So just throwing it out there, but pay us more.
Yes, please.
Just as a general kind of advice.
That's really hard, because I was celebrating as well as let's recognise inflation, please. That'd be great. But and
then you got
how many years am I into my? I'm at least 5 years into my career.
6. You're 6 years in.
I'm 6 years into my career, and I'm still paid less than the previous minimum figure for emerging professionals, or starters.
There's some stuff to be done there.
I can academically, I can go, excellent. This is well done, Icon, brilliant. But
sure, we're not paid that, but we can encourage projects and things like that to go with the minimum recommended entry level salary, which then makes it sound a bit more plausible. And then if they have the common decencies to go, isn't it funny that you're not paid that? You can retort with, isn't it funny you should pay me that?
It's not funny in the slightest.
Yes. But anyway, in the same kind of announcement, it was bundled in that they were considering running a webinar with Prospect on how unions can support conservatives in the workplace. Now, I have to say, Britain doesn't seem to be huge on unions, not in the way that we are where I come from, because in Sweden, unions are huge, or at least they were 10 years ago 12 years ago when I left. Like,
They used to be.
It was a pretty standard thing to be part of a union, and it would be really frowned upon not to be. Like, it would be seen as really weird, like, who do you think you are? So I think I come from a very different background in that way, that I think unions are really like a natural part of working life. And so that's not really been the case of my experience of working life in Britain. And conservatives especially often are not part of any union at all, and if they are, it's because they're part of a university, so they're part of the university union or similar. If we can get unions going, I think that can be a real stepping stone to continuing to make sure that we get paid adequately, that people actually look after our health, and that we don't do things that we're massively uncomfortable with. But
that we work on increasing diversity.
Yes, absolutely. So I think all of those things are things worth throwing out there. But so I just wanted to mention that.
It's incredible, the domino effect that just better pay would have on the field as a whole.
Yeah.
Well, I'd just like to say, Jenny, that you're still right on base with this diversity conversation, because not everybody, okay, that's a generalization, but a lot of people tend to turn diversity into a two-dimensional thing that's just visible minorities checking boxes on an application form. But diversity is this ever-growing, ever-changing thing that we have to recognize. And it's a call to action just as much as it is a group of people in a room. And so these are all factors that need to be considered in order to have as diverse of a workplace as possible that best represents the audience of the museum that you want to have, of the society that you're in. So I think you're right on the right track with that.
I also think, and I know that we all say that the professional bodies should be doing more and we should be joining unions, and we should, those are all things that are true. But I also think that the change starts with you. Like, if you're in a position where you are hiring people, or, have any influence whatsoever on any of that stuff, of recruitment, anything, this is your job. It's your job to make it a diverse workplace. You should give people a chance when they're different backgrounds. You should make sure that diverse audiences see the job advert and apply. You need to make this happen. It is your job. It is.
What can we do about it then? What else can we do about it? At the town hall debate last year, there were several themes that came up quite a lot as ways of tackling this. And I think some of the things that we were talking about, particularly Neris was talking about people feeling safe and like they belong in places. I don't necessarily know that talking about the financial side of the support, which is essentially what most of these solutions target, I don't necessarily think that they would solve that, but maybe it's a step in the right direction.
It is. You have to be able to afford to take the job. That's kind of a no-brainer in my opinion. Yeah. But I mean, aside from that, it is a little bit tricky, because for a workplace to feel like a safe place, it's good if there are other people there who can help you help make you feel safe. And that's about representation. So if you go into a museum and there are no people of color, and they're amongst the staff, for example, I mean, also amongst the exhibits, let's be fair, as a visitor, if there are no people who can make you feel like you belong, then that's a real problem. Now, unfortunately, at some point, someone's going to have to start so that other people can feel welcome. And that's, of course, the really tricky bit that we're in. And then we start going down the path again where it almost becomes a tokenism of, well, I see that you're the foreigner here, so it's up to you to make anyone else feel welcome. And also at the same time, could you please do all the conservation work on any of these objects that we feel that you might have to? But also tone this all down a little bit, because we don't want to cause any fuss. So, no pressure. So, I mean, this is the slight problem. And I think this is something that I said in the diversity panel, was that unfortunately, the diversity that already exists, we do kind of need to be beacons of it. And we do need to make sure that we are visible, because we need people to know that we exist, because that way they can feel welcome as well. That's kind of a big ask of like not very many people. That's a huge ask to say that, okay, well, I want disabled conservatives to say that they're disabled, so that other people with disabilities can say that, oh wow, I didn't know that I could even consider this a career path, but here's someone else with similar difficulties who are totally making this work. This is something I can do, etc. And that's true of all of these different like characteristics, that it would be great if we could be really visible about it, which is why I wore my special badges to the
I loved your special badges.
To the Icon 19 thing, for example, and stuff like that, just in an attempt to be more visible.
Well, one way we can sort of increase the inclusivity that we have in our labs, in our curatorial actions, in our exhibit designs, is to just make community consultation a more regular thing. We do have that obviously for certain exhibits and big name things that are happening in institutions, but I think it just needs to become a regular thing. Like, just maybe once a month or once every 3 months, open the doors to the lab and have a whole bunch of objects out and invite people to come in and say, what do you think we should do with this? Because here in Canada, we have really incredible Indigenous collections in a lot of our major institutions. And it's been a long time in the making, but we have these communities who are finally feeling comfortable enough to go into these institutions and to interact with their own culture and be like, you know, we don't want you to do this and we don't want you to do that, but we want you to do this action instead. And we still have a lot of work to do here in Canada, but it would be nice if the doors were more open and accessible for the public to come in and say, well, this is technically our collection as a whole. Why are you treating it this way? Why can't you do this instead?
I mean, that's a really good point, because, I mean, we all started as the public. It's not like we were born to be conservatives. Like, this is something we became later. But at first, we needed to find out about conservation, that it's a thing, and then decide that it was something for us. And we started as the public. So really, we just need to be more publicly visible and happy to have these conversations and happy to welcome people of all sorts into the museum to start with, or wherever we work. Like, obviously, we work in different settings.
I have two things to say. Firstly, my museum has a window into the conservation studio, and we get loads and loads of school groups come in. During term time, it's like at least 3 a week, and these are huge school groups, and they come and they do the gallery tour, and there's various events and stuff that the museum runs for them, and then they come upstairs to the top floor, and they all gather around the window and they stare in at us and they wave, and sometimes they bang on the window, which is annoying, but you know, who cares, and you wave back, and then they go away. And that could easily have been the first time they've been to a museum, and in that case definitely the first time that they had encountered conservation as a thing before, and certainly to see it happening. That is a fantastic way to start as a school. The second thing I wanted to say is I would really love it if there was data, and I doubt that there is. I would really love it if there was data on where does the problem, or what's the most common struggle.
That's a big question.
It is huge. It is a huge question. Sorry, so I'll make it more specific. I would love to know, do people of different backgrounds and communities start conservation and then struggle too much to make it work? Do they go through university, or do they look at university and then think, I just can't make this work? Do they not know about it at all? Do they just simply not feel welcome? Because I'd really like to know where to target, or where museums can help to target the help for this.
This is going to be really unhelpful, but from my own experiences, it's been a mix of all of them.
Yeah.
That might be the answer.
Yeah,
it will be. But in particular, coming from I'm going to center myself again in this narrative, which is something I feel a little uncomfortable doing, but, you know, I'm here, so I need to speak up about it. But coming from a Indian background, from a Punjabi background, there is a lot of stigma around the arts because they're considered low-paying jobs. So right off the bat, when I started I studied history in my undergrad, and then I did a degree in museum studies, and then I did my master's. And throughout the whole process, I had people within my family and within my community being like, well, you're never going to make enough to support a family, and you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. You should instead be going into things like medicine and engineering and law, where you'll be able to make a lot of money and support your family. So I think some of the reason why diversity can be so hard in terms of getting people in the door is because there's all these cultural stigmas attached to the lower paying jobs. And so it ties back again to that financial discussion where the knock-on effect, the domino effect of just increasing the pay and respecting people for the amount of education and work and experience that they have on a financial level would just do wonders for increasing the number of diverse backgrounds coming into the museum sector as a whole.
That's really interesting. That's because that's not something that the sort of perception of a lower or a high paying job is not something that I had considered.
Your parents are artists.
Well, I was brought up with, you're not going to art school. That's not happening, because they did and they knew that blah, 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 blah. That's an aside. But what I mean is I hadn't considered that. Obviously, I'd considered that not working in a high paid job would be a problem, because obviously it's a problem. But I hadn't considered the sort of the problems that working in a lower paid, the perceptions of the problems that working in a lower paid job could cause. I
mean, we also live in this very patriarchal society as a whole that's very heteronormative as well. And it doesn't recognize difference as a good thing.
Yeah.
So we are now, like, our generation and younger than us are all doing incredible work to make those differences visible and to celebrate them. But I think we still have, I don't want to say issues, but like older generations, boomers and up, have a hard time connecting because they grew up in a society that was very strict in its understanding of what was acceptable. So I'm hoping that, my nephews, when they come of age, if they want to be artists and they want to just go out and live bohemian lifestyles, that's something that's going to be totally acceptable to them, regardless of the culture that they're growing up in. But you never know. I mean, we have to do what we can today in hopes that tomorrow, 10 years down the road, 100 years down the road, the generations coming after us have it better off than we do. And that's true across any kind of struggle in any kind of society.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And very, very nicely put as well.
So at the discussion group, Icon wanted positive solutions. I like that because that's,
looking forward, right?
It's looking forward. It's absolutely essential that we have conversations about diversity and that we shout about it and everything. But at the end of the day, we also need things that people can do, that employers can do, changes that can be made. And one of those things that we did come up with is apprenticeships. That was something that was said, and I don't think that it's...
I think you're going to ultimately have the same initial issues of, like, we need to be welcoming to everyone.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be difficult to market this in a way that gets the kind of initial uptake that we're after.
We've got to take the first steps. The first steps are going to be a little bit clunky and a little bit self-aware. And that is just a process that we have to go through before we can come to a more true diversity. But I do think they would help.
No, absolutely.
And
they would absolutely.
I think
and paid apprenticeships, right? Paid apprenticeships.
Yes, that's the main thing, isn't it? They are paid apprenticeships. Recently, Patrick from Icon sent out an email saying that the apprenticeships have been improved, and essentially there's a spreadsheet going out to employers to ask people whether they're fit for purpose and whether they meet the needs of the employers and
if they'd consider taking people on.
If they would consider taking people on, yeah. So it's at the developmental stage, but it's moving far more than it was this time last year.
Absolutely.
And I'm hoping we'll see them in the next year.
Yeah.
That would be great. I don't know whether they've said how many there will be.
I think that vastly depends on who steps up and says that, yes, we'll host these. Or I don't know what the plan is for that side. I am hopeful that people will be offering these.
Especially the big institutions that can afford to host students on a regular basis. Because it's understandable for smaller ones that are like 100% charities, local authorities, they can't always host students. So when they can, super kudos to them. But for the big ones that do have a steady stream of income and funding, like we'd love to see more. Yeah. Love to see more apprenticeships in institutions like those.
Absolutely. There is the talking again of the UK, I'm sure there must be like an AIC equivalent or something. There are the Icon internships as well. And
here in Canada, there's this government project, I suppose you could call it, called Young Canada Works. And essentially what it is a government funded, although some of the funds are matched by the museums and institutions as well. It's a program that matches students, high school students, university students, with summer jobs in heritage institutions across the country. That's really incredible. And it is under the government mandate. It is under, I think, Canadian Heritage. And they also have a second stream called Young Canada Works, Building Careers in Heritage. And it's meant for recently graduated people. And then it creates these, like 6 month, 1 year apprenticeships, internships, fellowships type setup contracts for new graduates in conservation, in collections care, in curatorial programs. And it's, like I said, it's funded by the government. And so our museums have that support from bodies that are outside of just the institutions themselves and our conservation and museum associations. So maybe if we can shift focus to not just having all the costs of hosting an internship on our own institutions, but have them be maybe from the philanthropic side of a large company, or from the government, or, you know, from somewhere else, then that way we can also increase the number of apprenticeships.
Something else I just wanted to say about apprenticeships is that I was talking to, and I'm not going to name drop it because I haven't asked.
Yeah, fair.
But I asked a university that provides a conservation degree whether an apprenticeship would be a suitable equivalent to A-levels when accepting them into the degree, because that would take away from the one stage of the secondary education thing. So you would essentially be able to get a paid position straight out of GCSEs in the UK. And this person said yes, that would be a sort of or equivalent experience in quote marks. So that I think is very positive, but I don't think that's not well known. Though we might not have broken through the your job requirements is a degree in conservation thing, we may yet break through you also have to have had A-levels and everything through that stage.
That kind of goes back to the class discussion from earlier, because there's so much emphasis placed on higher education and the importance of having an education that we kind of tend to leave behind the people who've taken alternative pathways into careers like this. And so hopefully this new apprenticeship scheme of saying, yes, that is a way that you can get into higher education and into the career sector as a whole. Let's just show that we value everybody across the board.
And let's not forget that is kind of how conservation got started. It's not like it's not like we started with, no, let's have a university degree in this.
Exactly.
No, that's not how this began.
Yeah, no. So it's not about conservation, and I think actually maybe that's interesting. I was talking to a friend this morning, actually, who is a curator for a museum that I won't name again because I haven't asked.
Fair.
And he is BAME, and he got into museums when he was in his early 20s through a bursary grant / traineeship, very vague on the information here, through the Museums Association.
Oh, right.
And this was something that the Museums Association was doing in order to increase diversity in the curatorial profession, with the purpose and with the mindset of, well, if curators are shaping the stories and being the face of museums and interpreting the objects, you really want a diverse set of people, because otherwise you're just going to get the same stories recycled over and over again. I was really interested in that because that's not something that's been done in conservation yet, but it's really possible. And I wonder whether we haven't considered it yet, or we haven't got there yet, because we're not considered, conservators aren't necessarily considered as people who interpret objects. We passively conserve. We are hidden. We passively conserve, and there's only one outcome, surely, blah, 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 blah. But that's not the case, obviously, especially with the growing range of different jobs that conservators do. Because we're going to interpret the object differently, and that interpretation will affect our choices, blah, 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 all the things that we know. So I just wanted to slot that as a little...
but I do wonder if that's something where we can apply.
I absolutely agree. I think at the same time, you could also look, to use that horrible term, the trickle-down effect of traineeships like that. Because if you're bringing more and more curators of different backgrounds into a museum, well, then the way that they look at the people around them working with them in collections and in conservation will alter who is being hired. So hopefully that if we don't end up having traineeships in conservation specifically in the near future, that these other people coming in, that these diverse groups of people coming in at other levels in the museum has that trickle-down effect.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I kind of wanted to talk about what we can do on a more kind of organizational level. So I talked to someone who works for CIfA, and we're going to listen to that interview now.
So my name's Hannah Cobb, and I'm a senior lecturer in archaeology at the University of Manchester. I teach field practice and that kind of thing. But I am also the chair of the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists Equality and Diversity Group, and I'm probably just going to refer to the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists as CIfA from now on, so it's not such a massive mouthful.
So, Hannah, tell me more about what is this group and how did it come to be?
Well, it started in 2015. I think what's really interesting about archaeology is that there's such an amazing body of work already that shows the massive amount of inequalities in archaeology. So, starting right back with all the sort of early feminist literature from the 1980s, and in the UK from 1997 onwards, we've got Profiling the Profession. So we've got an amazing body of statistical data that shows the changing demographics in terms of gender, ethnicity and disability, and age as well, all the way through from 1997 in those different repeated Profiling the Profession statistics. And I've done a little bit of research myself with a study called Digging Diversity, where Profiling the Profession asks for labour market data from employers, but mine was a sort of more bottom-up, so talking to people in the workforce and also talking to students as well. And all of these things basically all say the same stuff. And also there's fantastic people like the British women archaeologists who have also been doing statistical analysis, and CIfA's Diggers Forum as well, who've also done, again, lots of studies about, people digging and having children and things like that as well. So there's a really good sort of swathe of data out there that tells us very clearly that archaeology massively lacks diversity. And I sort of got to a point, having done the first Digging Diversity study and reading all of that and teaching all of that, sort of point of frustration of thinking something needs to happen. And there is various people doing lots of things in various places and doing things brilliantly. And I sort of felt like our professional body needed to reflect all those other things that were going on. And so with a few other people, we set up the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists Equality and Diversity Group. And CIfA have a whole series of special interest groups. And so it was formed within the framework of that, although I think all of us agree, including CIfA as a whole, that equality and diversity isn't just a special interest. But that's kind of the governance structures in which we had to form the group. Absolutely. And we work very closely with a lot of the other groups. So we've done things like run mental health first aid training. So we ran that, have run that twice, once with the voluntary and community group and once with the Scottish group within CIfA. And we've sort of worked with people like the Diggers Forum to look at sort of various sort of problems and run conference sessions and things like that together. That's the backstory. That was a long and waffling backstory of why we needed, why I felt the group was very necessary. And then since we've formed, I think we formed with the idea of just doing some things under the umbrella of CIfA, within our professional body, to think about what we can do to diversify the profession. But actually, we've ended up doing a couple of things in terms of diversifying the profession, but also we've talked to CIfA themselves about their conference and practices at their conference, talking about things like their code of conduct, so just contributing to those kind of things, and existing principles that they had, and looking at how they can be made more robust in terms of equality and diversity. So we've been doing sort of two different things, really, looking at things that can be done to support developing equality and diversity across the profession, but also things that can be done within CIfA's own practice as well to change that. And that's been our kind of what we've been doing since 2015.
Do you have any good practical examples of things that you've tackled?
So we've done quite a lot of different things since we started. So we've advised on changes in CIfA's own practice, so in terms of its code of conduct and its group constitution. We've contributed to a CIfA ethics practice paper and statements about conference accessibility and panel guidance and conference zero tolerant approaches to harassment at conference. And then we've done all sorts of things where we've done things like we've connected with other external bodies, so particularly people like Prospect, who are the union for people working in commercial archaeology, and RICS, the Royal Institute for Chartered Surveyors. We've spoken to them because they have a really interesting equality and diversity scheme where they offer they offer a sort of ability to audit your own equality and diversity. So that was quite interesting finding out about that. And we worked with a whole series of other organisations. So we work with people like Trailblazers, British Women's Archaeologists, the Enabled Archaeology Foundation, people like that who sort of exist already, the Badger Respect campaign. And I'd like to think that we do as much as we can to support and big them up when we encounter contexts where it's worth that, and hopefully vice versa. We supported the Trailblazers Raising Horizons exhibition being at the CIfA conference in 2017. So lots of things like that. We run all sorts of sort of conference sessions at CIfA that are sort of active workshop training about diversity, good practice in equality and diversity. And we've spoken at lots of other conferences about this too. We're in the process of sort of developing the CIfA's guidance on disabilities, working with disabled employees. And then we've got a website where we sometimes have guest bloggers and things like that. We're really active, particularly in Twitter. And we've had representation at Pride in the last few years with the Museums Association, and we've consulted on the individual chartered archaeologist proposals as well that CIfA have put forward. And we're in the process of just putting together unconscious bias training, and we're also doing a whole thing about decolonising and hoping to make a kind of decolonising toolkit. The Women's Mentoring Network in Archaeology is definitely worth flagging up. In 2015, there was this CIfA conference session that was all about how we can smash the glass ceiling. And one of the things that was mooted then was the need for women to support one another and to have some kind of mentoring network. And I think partly the Women's Mentoring Network comes out of those conversations, but also various other people who have just been really keen to have that kind of thing. It's a Facebook group, so it's very informal, and it's a closed Facebook group, and it's for anyone who identifies as a woman. So it's also got trans members, and so it's really a very inclusive group, and it's there for sort of people who are looking for specific mentorings. But it's also a place for people to sort of ask for sort of advice, professional advice, or advice on lack of professionalism that they've encountered and what a good way to deal with that is and things. And I think that is a fantastic and galvanizing resource. And a parallel group, it's probably also worth mentioning, is the Badger Respect Facebook group, which is also a closed women's Facebook group and a sort of place, again, to be a sort of sounding board. So, again, these kind of Facebook networks are about sharing the resources that are already out there.
That's a good point, yeah. I mean, you do see it across the museum sector. Like, there are a number of these sort of support networks that we have talked about on the episode, like Museum Detox and Museum As Muck and stuff like that. And it is really interesting. I would personally love to see conservation groups that are similar, maybe around, supporting people with disabilities, or, because obviously conservation being a very female dominant profession right now, I feel like maybe the networking angle isn't really where it's at for us, but maybe it is for the kind of, at the moment, underrepresented groups that we can come together in similar support networks. So,
absolutely. I would point people to the Enabled Archaeology Facebook group as well. So, extremely sadly, the founder of that, Teresa O'Mahony, passed away a few weeks ago. But Teresa was an absolute powerhouse of activism for the rights of archaeologists with different, enabled archaeologists was her term. And so the Enabled Archaeology Forum is really sort of a Facebook place for people with any kind of disability to sort of, again, discuss and receive sort of support in exactly the same kind of networking way. And Teresa had hopes for the Enabled Archaeology Foundation. So I think the Facebook group is the Enabled Archaeology Group, and then her hope was to develop an Enabled Archaeology Foundation to support archaeologists with disabilities within the workplace and to get people back into work. And hopefully that will be able to fulfill some of her legacy in the future.
Oh, that's wonderful.
We were conscious that as we were doing all of these smaller things, that to make an effect at a larger scale, we needed to get more people round the table than just CIfA and to have a conversation across the profession. So the thing that I think, I feel really proud that we did this was that last year in 2018, in July, we held a cross-sector action meeting on equality and diversity and inclusion. And we brought together a really broad broad swathe of people from across the profession, people from sort of big heritage organisations, people from national government, a local government, so Algio were represented, CBA were there, then sort of independent people, lots of different people, lots of different units, various academic institutions were represented. And we sat down in that meeting and we said, what can we do to achieve some kind of cross-sector agreement about equality and diversity? What can we actually do about this, and who's going to do it? What are we going to do? It was a really productive meeting. I think one of the most productive things that came out of it was that what we need to do is it's really easy to say it, it's not so easy to do it, but we need to have a full culture change on equality and diversity that mirrors the culture change that happened on health and safety, 20 years ago or so, where now nobody would go down an unshored hole with no PPE and, those kind of things just wouldn't happen.
That's a good point.
Wouldn't do those. Yeah, and that kind of change in terms of equality and diversity needs to be the same thing. And so that was this big meeting. One of the things that came out of that was that then CIfA and FAME, so the Federation of Archaeological Managers in England, and Prospect, and a group of other people formed an industry working party and put together a statement which committed to working on equality and diversity and to support that kind of culture change, to support enacting that culture change. I feel really proud that we've sort of worked with CIfA towards achieving that, and that's really been something that has been achieved by voices across the profession. And I think the next thing now is to see what happens from that. So I think that's going to be the next thing.
If there's anyone out there who wants to be a change maker like that and who wants to set something like this up or become involved even with what you're doing, what would be your advice to them, do you think?
That the culture change analogy was a really useful one. And I think to have that kind of culture change, you need to have everyone on board. And so having sort of big open conversations is really important, but also sort of that kind of constant activism as well. So I think, the fact that statement happened was brilliant, but now we need to make sure that statement is enacted. And there's lots of different people who I think are sort of doing such a brilliant job of that, using things like social media to call out inequalities. That's probably a really sort of good place to start. So start the conversation on a formal level, keep up the activism by sort of letter writing, social media, and that kind of thing.
It's really good to hear what other people in the heritage sector are doing. And, in adjacent fields, archaeology has a lot of the same struggles that conservation does. And I think it's really good to hear that, you're making progress and what people can do and what they are doing.
Oh, thank you. I do think, though, that the proof will be in the pudding as well. It feels like this is probably everyone who's in the midst of these kind of things feels like this is the time where loads of action is occurring. It definitely feels like this, but I think for us as well, we probably need to continually keep checking ourselves as well. So the next time that Profiling the Profession or Digging Diversity run, we need to see the changes in the statistics. And if things haven't changed, then we've not done enough. And also, I think probably sort of making connections between different organisations. So, I know that there's already connections between ICON and CIfA, but in terms of sort of equality and diversity, the Equality and Diversity Group within CIfA, we're happy to chat to anyone really. So just give us a shout.
So we can come at this from the top organisational level at the same time as from the bottom, from the people who are applying to jobs. Grassroots. Yeah. So do we have ideas of what we can do from the grassroots?
I think talk about diversity, like actually bring it up. And again, actively, if you're recruiting, have an open mind.
Yeah.
Don't hire someone who looks exactly like you.
Yeah. And remember that people are more than just the boxes that they check on the form. People are like onions. We're multi-layered.
Even when it comes to like job advertise them widely. Make sure people are aware of where to look for these jobs even. Something as simple as that can really help.
And everybody should take the opportunity to educate themselves as well. So if that means just, going to your local library and reading books by writers of color or, writers of a different religion than you, or writers who have opposing viewpoints and morals than you, like take the opportunities to do that. Listen to podcasts made by creators who don't look like you, who don't think like you. do. I'd just like to take a second here and say, for people in North America, I heartily recommend the Media Indigena and the All My Relations podcasts, because they are created, produced, presented by Indigenous peoples here on Turtle Island. And they are incredible. They've been eye-opening for me in the last couple of years that I've been listening to them. And I think that we should all take the opportunity where we can to decolonize our own thinking. The book White Fragility has been out for a while, and I know several people have read that one. I haven't had the opportunity yet. But, anything you can to learn more about something that's not the way you think, take that opportunity. You don't have to advertise it. You can just do it in your own spare time, but just read something, listen to something, keep your mind open. And I think from there, as soon as we start widening our worldviews, then we will start seeing much more tangible change along the way.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also build up colleagues who,
Yes.
Who come from diverse backgrounds. Like, celebrate them, make them feel included, go the extra mile. They're your colleagues. Jesus, help them.
Exactly. And listen to them when they speak up saying, oh, maybe you shouldn't do this because,
Also, a huge shout out to the team at Museum Detox, who also do a lot of really, really good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Hi, guys.
In decolonizing museums and the workforce, and just generally shouting in a really, really good way. Mm-hmm. They do great work, basically. Check them out.
I feel like Twitter is a really, really powerful sphere here, and that sounds really, really millennial, but...
No, but it is. Social media is where we can get our voices out there.
Yeah.
Maybe another thing to mention is that maybe don't feel discouraged if you come across people who don't see the point of diversity. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe just tune them out and ignore them. Or better yet, maybe try to educate them. If it drives you too insane, maybe try to ignore it. And if you feel strong enough...
Don't answer late at night after a glass of wine.
If you feel strong enough, educate them.
But don't do it publicly, though. Don't do it publicly, though, because more often than not, at least in my own experience, a slightly awkward private conversation will do so much more for nudging a person into recognizing that their behavior is problematic than publicly calling them out, because then you're putting them into a corner. So it's going to be awkward. It's going to hurt on both ends, but have that private conversation where you say, hey, maybe, this is something you should think about. It hurt my feelings when you said it.
You know what? That's a really good point.
Really
That's
nice.
some good soft skills there, I have to say.
We all know that it's not enough to not be racist. We all have to be actively anti-racist and actively anti-classist and anti-homophobic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's hard. It is hard work. And like, I understand that, you understand that. I think we all know that it is really hard to do that, to change your mindset. So if this is something that you want to do or something that you're open to doing to change your mindset, just like Kloe said, like, listen first. It's not going to be immediate. It's going to take time. I'm sitting here at age 27 as a brown woman, and I am still decolonizing my mindset, and I still have so much work to do. So just recognize that it's a process and that no one's going to be perfect, but you just have to try. That's all we ask. You just try. Fantastic. I just wanted to say thank you to the two of you, to the C Word podcast, for having me on for this discussion. It's been absolutely incredible. And I'd just like to take a moment and ask the audience that if I said anything in error, if I said anything that you disagree with, please come to me on social media and let me know. I want to fix my thinking. I want to be better. So, educate me. And I know that's asking a lot and that that's unpaid labor, but at least point me in the direction of some resources and help me better myself, so that I can better represent, not just brown women, but just, people in general. So yes, thanks again.
Oh, you're welcome. And
Thank you, you're very welcome.
Also, that does extend to the both of us as well. Like, please,
comments and corrections are always absolutely...
come and find us. You know who we are. So, because we too need to improve ourselves. Earlier, we did talk a little bit about class, and I thought this is definitely a topic that I would like to discuss in more detail. So I found someone to talk to. Sam, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name's Sam Evans. I'm a PhD researcher at Birkbeck University in the Department of Organisational Psychology. I've been researching class for the last 3 years in museum work. I did actually used to work in museums, probably for about 15 years. I worked in various organisations, but I left... I'm thinking probably about 10 years, perhaps longer ago than that. And my job was marketing, and I sort of got to a certain point and then sort of left the museum sector and went and worked in the charitable sector. Then I left there and decided I wanted to actually become an occupational psychologist. So it's a complete career change.
Yeah.
So I did an MSc in occupational psychology. And in that, I did research actually into age and gender. But what was interesting in that research was that people talked a lot about class. Mm-hmm. So when I was putting together ideas for my PhD, I looked into class and I looked into how it had been researched in occupational psychology. And it's been very under-researched, which is quite surprising because there's a big connection between class and work. You know, often work is used to class people.
Yes.
But there's been very little research into the sort of processes by which people actually class each other at work. So, I mean, one of the issues with class, and this came up a lot in my research, is the sort of difficulty of measuring class and of defining class. You know, it's something that's actually been debated for 150 years since the time of Karl Marx. So I don't think there's going to be one definite measure of class coming up soon.
No.
But we all sort of understand class, even if we don't talk about it, as you've sort of mentioned, that class is a bit taboo. And this is one of the things I think within occupational psychology, which you know, looks at how people operate in the workplace. A lot of the disciplines sort of emerged at a time when class became very silenced politically. And in the UK, this has sort of happened since the time of end of the last century. There's this sort of been this idea that class doesn't matter anymore, that other areas of identity matter more so. And, you know, this may be the case, but what's happened is the sort of difficulty in knowing how to research class, and also that work has changed so much, and the sort of traditional measures of class, different occupations, have not really kept up with the changes in work.
That's interesting that you say that, because I do remember, this is years ago now, but I feel like there was some sort of quiz or survey or something that you could take, and it was suggesting a new class. So it was trying not to do the middle class, working class thing, but instead proposed new categories. And I remember everyone I knew taking the quiz and disagreeing with it, and, you know, all these things. And it was really fascinating to kind of see how people were trying to unpick class as a topic.
That's probably the BBC Great British Class Survey.
That sounds right.
They used the work of it's a sociologist, Pierre Bourdieu. So they were looking at not just how work classes people or occupational category, but the sort of capital that people have. So including in that was economic capital, which is obviously sort of money, but they were also looking at wealth and different assets. Social capital, which is the sort of connections that people have, the who you know. And then cultural capital, which is sort of quite a broad term to include things like educational qualifications, sort of cultural habits, you know, and also accent and the clothes that people wear. So they were looking at the sort of connections between the type of work people do and all those different forms of capital. And from that, I think they came up with 7 different classes. I'm interested in looking at not having a sort of pre-constructed idea of class as a category. I wanted to look at class in context. And because I've worked in museums, and because I know also that class had not been really discussed within the sector, you know, when I worked in museums, it was the sort of narrative was around social inclusion, but we weren't really talking about class then. And there's very little talk of the workforce. It was the focus was always on the audiences. So I knew that there was probably a sort of a gap there. I'm interested in understanding how, from a work point of view, what does it take for somebody to actually get into a particular occupational field like working in museums? How do they get on? And what might be the barriers in terms of what types of capital are you expected to have? I'm interested in understanding how the sort of overall field is constructed. So in order to understand what might be a source of inequality, you need to understand the different hierarchies. You know, what type of work is valued above other types of work, and why is that? So it's almost, rather than looking at categories, it's looking at the processes and the sort of discourses around how people in museums value different types of work. What are the discourses that shape, you know, those valuing processes? There was a huge response to people taking part, and I think in part that was because people hadn't had an opportunity to talk about class before, or not very much. So the thing that I sent around to participants, which was just looking at the sort of how is museum work classed, that's really just looking at a small part of the data. So there is still a lot more analysis to do. But from the sort of analysis that I've done so far, you could definitely say that it's a very differentiated field. It's quite divided in some ways, and there's very definite hierarchies. There's sort of quite an interesting relationship, I think, between the sort of idea that in museum work, the sort of higher status types of work are those that are more very particular to museums, that are very specialist to museums, such as curatorial curatorial, such as conservation work. This is the work that, I asked participants to actually map which work they thought was the higher status. So the higher status positions like curator and conservator are sort of the roles that are very specialist to the field. And what they do is actually lend distinction to museums. They make museum work a very sort of specialist and distinctive type of work. But they're obviously the most sort of sought after roles. And what seems to have happened is that as more and more people, there is a narrative about more and more people wanting to do museum work. So the sort of goalposts, if you like, have shifted. So actually to do these types of work, you have to have, perhaps a degree might have sufficed. Now people need the master's in heritage or, a specialist postgraduate and increasingly a PhD. Because of the changes in education, this obviously costs people money. So what you have is this, to achieve these high status roles, which aren't very well paid, you need to have increasingly amounts of economic capital. And people talk quite a lot about either having parents or a partner that could support them.
Yeah.
It's almost like an invisible cost of, a career in museums. Other people made a choice that rather than going for these very sort of high status but difficult to achieve roles, that they, just working museums would be fine. So you have, and this is what I did, was marketing roles or sort of general managerial positions or fundraising. So these types of roles, because it's less specialist, there's a sort of different relationship in terms of supply and demand. So these people can actually command slightly higher salaries. They're not quite as high status, but they have a higher salary. So you have this sort of inverse relationship between status and money. Yes. It's a choice, but it's really what it means is that museum work is quite a privileged sort of work, because to be in a position to sacrifice income, to, spend a lot of money on achieving that sort of work, that's easier for some people than it is for others. And this is a very sort of strong theme coming out of the data. There's a sort of difference between how museums as employers are actually classed. And I've looked at that as well. Lots of people say, for example, I did this myself, as a marketing person, and you could choose to work for different types of organisations, but working for a national museum would give you that higher status. And equally, people talked about national museums also, capitalising on that, so that actually for people to take a job at a national museum, they'd probably have to accept a slightly lower salary. But it's still seen as actually a sort of higher status position and therefore more valued.
Yeah, that's a very familiar pattern in terms of conservation as well.
There's this idea that if you're an individual employee, if you want those high status positions, you sacrifice the economic return. And a lot of people talk to me about never being able to have a mortgage, not being able to do those things. And some people have left the sector so they could actually, live. But if you contrast this with institutions having this sort of high status like national museums, they can capitalise on that. They will be able to use their brand to basically maximise income and maximise profile. So there is something around this sort of division really between the employer and the employee. And I think this is happening in lots of areas of work and probably in cultural work. Although I think there's quite a sort of collaborative culture in museums, there's not a strong sense of, it's not very unionised in terms of that sort of old idea of class being between, capital and labour, which is the sort of more, Marxist idea of class. Then that relationship is obviously there, but because it's the employers that are maximising the sort of passion and commitment of employees who want to work and will do so for very little money.
Yeah.
And this is partly because I think people who work in museums, once you get into museums, or even if you're trying to get into museums, there is this sort of strong passion or sort of commitment and belief in what museums do and what they're all about. And allied to that, this sort of understanding that, museums are in a sort of very poor and precarious funding situation.
I think as a sector, we do make an awful lot of excuses in terms of, there have been funding cuts and no one's very well off. And ultimately, it just feeds into this, that they're allowed to pay us less.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating kind of martyrdom that I find in the museum sector and not very many other places.
One of the things, the next bit of analysis I'm looking at is this sort of ideas about what it takes to get in and get on. So I've talked a little bit about how, this sort of increasing need for cultural capital, increasing amounts of qualifications, I think also there's a sense of needing to almost define your career by staying in museums. And I think there's a sort of fear amongst people that if they find a job in museums, they need to stay, because once they leave, it's very difficult to get back in. Or you have this idea of career being defined by the amount of time you've spent in the sector. So there's not a lot of sort of moving in and moving out. You know, what I'm finding is that people talk about their career, and this is what I've collected is interviews with people and their sort of career narratives, which are sort of quite fractured and chaotic.
Chaotic is a very good word.
Yes. It seems to be these people are sort of accumulating a huge amount of skill and experience, but they're not finding it easy to piece these together in any sort of direction. And I think for people, feeling like, if you need income, you need to pay your rent with something because you don't have resource to rely on from your parents or any inheritance, you're going to need to find a job somewhere. And I think with sort of increasing amounts of work that's projectified, that everything's sort of on contracts or short term, then people somehow, how can they manage those sort of gaps and how can they ever have that sort of security?
Where do you hope that your research will take you? What are you envisaging for the next couple of stages of your research?
I still want to analyse data. So the second area is looking at analysing the career narratives of people and how they're talking about their career journeys and also the sort of barriers to getting in and getting on. And then I'm looking at how people talk about class itself. So class is quite strange. I think you mentioned that it can be taboo, and there's this sort of emerging idea as well that whilst, money is sort of silenced within museum world and museum work, that also class has been, and that people feel in order to prove that they're working class, they have to, it's almost sort of construct a hardship narrative. It's almost to say, look, this is how hard things have been for me. They feel like they have to prove it. So the next two stages are looking at career narratives and then looking at what this means for the individual. In terms of where this actually goes, I mean, obviously I'm doing this as a PhD, so I need to write this up as a PhD, yes. And it has the academic side to it, which is making sure that this is like an original contribution to knowledge. But because, people have been so generous in terms of taking part and so interested in this work, and also because, I've worked in the museum sector, I'm very keen that it's actually useful. Yeah. I read somewhere, and this is really, it's not a cop-out, but there's a really good book, The Class Ceiling, which is looking at some of these issues in other areas of work. Sam Friedman and Daniel Lawrison, and they said that academics are very good at identifying the problems, but not the solutions. So in a way, that's sort of what I want to do is identify the problem and then put it back over to people in the sector. There's a conference in November at the British Museum that's looking at diversity and equality in museums. So I'm going to do a small workshop there just to sort of just see what people think might be the solutions. I mean, I think people in museums are very creative. So, they're best placed to actually come up with what might work and what could be done.
If people want to know more, is there a place they can go and read up on what you're doing, or a blog they can follow, or?
I think probably to find me on Twitter is the easiest thing to do. So if you look up Sam is at work.
Thank you so much for talking to us, Sam.
Pleasure.
And coming up, an interview with Museum As Muck.
My name's Michelle McGrath, and I founded Museum As Muck last year.
Hi, I'm Kathleen. I am a member of Museum As Muck from quite early on. I think I was one of the early people to sign up, and I'm part of the steering group now.
So I was kind of hoping that people who haven't heard of your group before, that you could give them a bit of an introduction to what Museum As Muck is.
Museum As Muck essentially is a network of working class museum and gallery professionals. We kind of came together back in the summer of 2018. I guess it stemmed from me personally, kind of being in the sector for, over a decade and kind of getting to a point where I was getting a bit sick and tired of the fact that there weren't, as many working class people as there should be. Originally the idea was just to kind of connect with some other working class people and maybe make some friends, share our experiences, kind of make contacts. but it's kind of grown massively since then. Now we've got over 400 members in the UK, which is amazing. I mean, I was kind of surprised at the response, really, and it was really great to kind of have people getting in touch and saying, you know, that they wanted to be part of it.
Yeah, so actually when I found out that Michelle had started the group, I think I first saw it. There was a tweet from Sarah Wajid, who started Museum Detox. And when I saw her promoting this group for working class museum people, I was just so excited that someone had finally put a group together, because it was something that I think a few people had sort of talked about. I'd certainly been thinking about it myself as something that was needed in the sector. So yeah, as soon as Michelle put it into action, I was raring to go and get involved.
I mean, it really does fill a gap.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that since the group has been in place, I've had so many conversations with people who are just so thrilled that it exists, because it's something that people have felt that they couldn't talk about within their work and museum careers. Apart from the kind of more of the kind of policy and campaigning stuff, I think the personal impact of it is what's been really great to see and be a part of.
The first time I actually saw you guys kind of in the flesh, as it were, you were at the Museums Association conference in 2018.
That was... yeah, kind of in June, I kind of put the network together, and then we did that in November, but we had to put an application in by July. So kind of within a month of making connections, we kind of had to put together a proposal for an intervention at the Festival of Change. But it came together, and that's where kind of Kathleen and some of the other kind of core steering group members came on board. And we created an intervention called Supermuckers, because we wanted to create a kind of engaging tongue-in-cheek activity, so that people would kind of be drawn in to talking about class, because it's quite a difficult thing to talk about sometimes. We kind of got props and tabards and even a toy till.
Yeah, so the concept was that it was a supermarket where we could talk about class. So we wanted to play around with some of the, as Michelle said, a bit tongue-in-cheek about some of people's ideas about class. So we were wearing tabards, and we had lots of props as part of our supermarket, which spoke to a lot of the members' experiences of being working class and their backgrounds growing up. So it was kind of a bit fun and tongue-in-cheek, but also dealing with some quite serious issues and some people's personal experiences that were quite affecting. And it was quite emotional at times to talk about class and talk about people's backgrounds with all of the delegates that were at the conference.
Another level to the intervention was in response to kind of what we feel is the issue that we're dealing with here, which is that 35% of the UK population is working class, whereas only 21% of museum workers are working class. And that's a figure from the Panic Report of 2018. If people haven't read that, then get on it, because it's really important. So what we wanted to do was a bit of live action research. So we had a jobs board in our supermarket where we asked people to identify their background, so that we could find out, you know, of those 21%, which departments they worked in. Because, I mean, we all know from working in museums that actually the majority of working class people are in certain departments, such as front of house or security or finance. And there's a real lack of representation in leadership positions, but there's no evidence or studies to show this at the moment. That's a piece of work that needs to be done if anyone wants to jump on that. So we kind of did a bit of our own research during the intervention as well, which was great, because it really got people to think about their position and their privilege.
Because one of the things that you asked was also, I want to say, what the chief income earner of your household when you were growing up was doing.
So class is really, really difficult to define and difficult to measure. And people have kind of used different ways of doing it in the past, such as postcodes, but that doesn't really work. So the most accurate measure that people are working with at the moment is your parents' occupation when you were 14. So that's the question that we were asking delegates to answer. And then we use the National Statistics socioeconomic classifications to kind of measure that. So, for example, if the chief earner in your household was a senior manager or chief executive, you're kind of at the top of the strata, and it goes down 3 different occupations.
So that's really fantastic that you're doing that kind of, like, even if it's just preliminary research, that's fantastic. What sort of other things are you doing, you know, right now as an organization?
Well, we recently had our first AGM which was in September, which was hosted at the British Museum as part of their national programme. We're also going to be present at the British Museum National Programmes Conference, which is coming up on the 4th of November. So we are looking to have presence at more big national museum events, because I think part of it is about visibility and encouraging people to have these conversations. As we said before, the kind of personal impact of being able to talk to other people who identify as working class is really important, but it's also important that we talk to people who don't identify as working class, and particularly people who are in positions of power and authority in museums.
Yeah.
So alongside our AGM, we also hosted a director's breakfast as part of the BM event. And that was an opportunity for us to speak to museum directors and HR directors about the positive steps that they can take.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yes, we just want to kind of strengthen and consolidate. And we've been doing recruitment for the steering group. So we're kind of, making it a bit more formal. Just to touch on what Kathleen was saying about the 4th of November at the British Museum, that's actually going to be a working class tea party.
Oh,
so that is an
fantastic.
event not to be missed. So people need to get on that and come for tea and broken biscuits and have class chats with us.
Where are you headed as a group? Like, what are you looking forward to doing in the near future?
Well, I think as Michelle was just saying, we're looking to expand our steering group a little bit. We'll be looking to them to help shape what we do in the future. We want to have a bit more representation of people in the regions of the UK, because we're all London or South East based at the moment. And also looking to diversify the steering group in other ways. So I kind of feel like we can't say too much at the moment, because we will be taking on the input of those other people.
One other thing that we should mention is that we did recently do a piece of work around creating our manifesto that we should be launching really soon.
If people want to join you or find out a bit more about you, where should they go?
So there's a couple of ways. Everybody and anybody should follow us on Twitter. That's at Museum As Muck. And if you're a mucker, you should join the Facebook group, Museum As Muck, or you can email us at museumasmuck@gmail.com. But also any other inquiries, just send us an email and we'll get back to you.
Well, thanks so much for talking to us today.
No problem.
For having us.
It's a pleasure.
Dear Jane, when it comes to environmental monitors, I'm a bit confused about the difference between calibration and accuracy. I wonder if you could help me with some tips. So the terms calibration is something we all know is important in conservation when it comes to our environmental monitoring data. When we think about how much effort we spend on collecting the data, downloading, filing and interrogating, the one thing we absolutely want to be sure is that time is well spent and that the data we've got is accurate. However, I think we could do a little bit better in the sector generally in terms of our precise use of the terms. Accuracy is a measure of how well it records what's actually going on. Now, for some time, an accuracy, if it's consistently inaccurate, is not too bad. A lot of us have our watches or clocks adjusted maybe 3 minutes too fast in order to get places on time. I certainly do. It doesn't mean that it ever shifts. It's always consistently 3 minutes too fast, so it's not a particular problem. On the other hand, if I always knew it was 3 minutes out, but ever didn't know if it was 3 minutes fast or 3 minutes slow, that would be a real problem. There's different things in terms of accuracy, precision and drift that we need to keep our heads around, but none of those are calibration. So what is calibration? Well, calibration is about checking your machine against a standard. Now, your standard could be a good one, or your standard could be a bad one. So, for example, what time is it in the morning? You could check against the time at which your cat jumps on you and starts to treadle you. That could be an incredibly precise measurement, or it could be standardised against your cat's hungriness, which is all, pretty constant when it comes to cats. On the other hand, you could calibrate your time against a very precise measure of time, and that would be calibrating against a very reliable standard. So most of the time when we're checking our environmental monitors, we want to calibrate against a very precise standard. The best of which is one which is traceable, and a mass traceable in the UK, where you can say that I've calibrated it against a traceable standard. Now, that's worth doing for a really high quality piece of environmental monitoring equipment, but probably not for a low quality one that we spent 30 quid on, because the calibration process itself will probably cost us more. In the C Word the other day, they were talking about calibration and accuracy. And one of the things that people sometimes do is shift around between calibration and adjustment. If I take my logger and I measure it against a very reliable standard, I might know for sure that at 50% relative humidity, it's reading 52. I don't necessarily have to adjust that, especially if I read it at 70% and at 30%, and at both of those conditions, it's 2% out above. It means that I can calibrate it, know that it's out by 2, but be fairly satisfied that nothing has terribly difficult to interpret. I might then leave it, check it again in 6 months' time, and if it's still 2% out in exactly the same way across all those 3 points of measurement, then I might be very happy. I do encourage people not to adjust equipment too often, because I think that depending on whether you share equipment, depending on how you interpret it, it has the potential to allow measurements to drift. So that if something is wrong by 2 up and then 3 down and then 2 up and then 3 down, you won't notice it because you keep adjusting it. So calibration is checking against a standard. That standard can be good or bad. Adjustment is changing your readings to match that standard. Adjustment is not necessary for calibration. And accuracy is not the same as calibrated. So a logger might be calibrated, but might be a very cheap piece of kit and may only have an accuracy of plus or minus 3, even less, say, cold temperatures. And it can be a low accurate logger, even if it is calibrated. There are lots of ways of calibrating. I have to say that the soluble salts method is one that you really have to read around a little bit in order to get it right in terms of the air mixing and things like that. So if the accuracy of your logger is incredibly important to you, then having it checked against a traceable standard is a great thing. You might then use that as a transfer calibration. That means you take your well-calibrated, accurate, expensive bit of kit and check all your cheaper bits of kit against it. That's a transfer calibration. And if you find that 1 or 2 bits of kit are considerably out, perhaps checking them over 2 or 3 days, then maybe the answer is to replace the kit rather than to adjust it if you find it's just not a reliable piece of kit. So that's, I hope, a very quick introduction to the difference between calibration and adjustment and accuracy. Over and out.
And as usual, we welcome your comments, questions and corrections. And this is the point where we're going to make a special little announcement.
Hopefully not ruin your week.
Yeah, no, it's a good announcement, and it's
Christmas based though.
Yeah, it's true.
It's that time of year again.
We've nearly gotten Halloween out of the way, so now we're allowed to talk about Christmas, and it's true. So during November, we're going to be running a little bit of a giveaway campaign because we've made some really special conservation Christmas crackers that we are looking forward to distributing. So
cue Christmas bells.
Yeah. So yes, basically there's going to be 20 of these Christmas crackers up for grabs. Keep an eye on our social media because that's where the campaign will be running. We just want you to know. So pay attention to Twitter and Facebook and more details will follow. If you're enjoying the C Word and would like to support our work, then please consider becoming one of our patrons. For as little as $1 per month, you can help us keep our episodes online and more of them coming. Patreon helps us meet our regular costs for the show, and also to plan ahead so we know roughly how much of a monthly budget we've got. That's super helpful when you're trying to do something special like buy a better microphone or save up to go to a special event. Your support also helps keep us free of advertisement. In return, our supporters get access to our archive of extended episodes, which you can only access on our Patreon page. Yeah, for that $1 a month, you get a little extra audio enjoyment. We've crunched the numbers, and it's about 10% extra content on a regular basis. Well, that's not bad for less than a cup of coffee, eh? If supporting us sounds like something you'd like to do, then head over to patreon.com/thecword and join our bunch of absolute champions. And a warm welcome to our latest patron, Rosie. Thank you so much for supporting us. Thanks for listening. We're the C Word, and you've been listening to Aly Singh, Kloe, Rumsey, and me, Jenny Mathiasson. Join us next time for an episode about thinking big. In the meantime, check out our website at thecword.show, tweet us at thecwordpodcast, or simply email us on thecwordpodcast@gmail.com. The intro and outro music is Spring by Didi Music, used under Creative Commons Attribution License. Additional music and sound effects by Callum Robertson. This has been a Wooden Dice production.
do this.
It's like someone deflated Kloe.
Yeah, hang on.